a well-known phrase that goes something like this: challenging times lead to the development of strong men. These strong men in turn bring about prosperous and good times. However, these good times often result in the emergence of weaker men, and these weaker men eventually lead to the return of difficult times. This is a phrase that has been used frequently, particularly over the last 5 to 10 years as the feminist movement grows and the birth rate in most Western nations declines. Public spending begins to rise, and we observe an increase in socialist policies, especially in Europe. There is this ongoing conflict happening between Muslim men and native Europeans. You often see conservative individuals using this phrase, trying to lay blame on men who they perceive as weak, labeling them as beta and all these other terms. Utter nonsense. I'm going to mention this swiftly, but it's a fallacy. Truly, it's a fallacy, something that when you ponder it doesn't make any sense at all. Because when you consider it, feminism and socialism are closely linked. Feminism relies on the government for its existence and survival, and the policies that feminism advocates and supports are indeed socialist policies, correct? However, they go on to say that, oh, it's actually the weak men who have also turned into socialists, or they've become corrupted themselves, or they've allowed women to act inappropriately, or they didn't know how to properly dominate or tame women, or something along those lines. This is complete nonsense for several reasons. Women actually lack substantial power. While they do have political power, the universal vote can be taken away at any moment. The government could easily impose a rule that to vote, one must serve in the military, effectively excluding. Alternatively, they could stipulate that you can't receive welfare or you must pay income tax. It's quite simple to exclude them from the universal vote. So, even their vote, the man got the vote because he serves in the army, which is a significant contribution to the country. Meanwhile, the woman received it hand over fist without any such service. They have no power of their own. They haven't achieved anything on their own merit. They've been given it. And that's the crucial point here. And that's exactly where the blame comes from. Because it's only those with power who can give power to other people. Those who don't have power cannot give power, nor can they share power, because they simply don't possess it. So who are the men who, since the 18th century, actually not the 18th century, right, the 19th century, the 20th century, since the beginning of feminism, around 1008, 50, 60, 70%, who were the guys who kept giving space and power to women so that they could change society as they saw fit. It was the men who already had power. They were theoretically the alphas, you know. They were the ones who gave the power, not the guys below them, you know, no, the betas, the enforcers, you know. So if you take this sentence, you can clearly see that it wasn't the weak men who created the difficult times. They simply didn't have the power. It was actually the strong men who were responsible for creating the difficult times. I mean, perhaps they had a good partner and assumed that all women were like that. Do you understand that they believed all women were honorable? Or maybe they fell for the tale of equality, thinking that men and women are interchangeable, that there's no real difference between them. But you see, every feminist wave, every victory was always like this. Since the 19th century, we've witnessed the conquest of divorce, right? It was different from what it became in the 20th century, but they fought hard. Women struggled, fought persistently, and they eventually succeeded because the men allowed it, you know, the men holding power permitted it. They fought to make sure that in a divorce, during their separation, the children would remain with them. Back then, of course, in the 19th century, the man had to be unfaithful. He had to commit some wrongdoing. But then, in the early 20th century, women gained the right to vote. It was similar. Nothing was required in exchange. Men in power granted it to women, you see. And then you consider the decades of the 60s and 70s. During this time, no-fault divorce became prevalent, a system where often everything was awarded to the woman. This further reinforced the idea that child custody would almost always go to the mother. Additionally, there was much discussion around the topic of abortion and various other issues. In all these circumstances, it was the men, those who were at the pinnacle of society and held significant power, who were gradually ceding this power to women. They're giving them the power to shape society entirely by the female imperative, you know? So, in fact, you might even say, yes, that tough times indeed create strong men, right? However, it's not just strong men who create good times, you know? It's actually both the strong and the weak, the entire society working together, that really creates the good times. Do you understand what I mean? So they often say that good times lead to weak men. But if you consider the last 50 years, why have weak men emerged during this period? because the strong men simply allowed divorce to be legalized in an incredibly foolish manner that leaves the children solely in the care of the woman. Only the woman ends up male children, and the man no longer has any role in the family. He no longer takes part in raising the children or anything else. So, how can you blame the guy who is supposedly weak and never had contact with his father? This happened because his wife decided to file for divorce and he was cut off from his father. It's not the guy raised by his divorced mom who's less masculine now. The blame is on those earlier guys who let things become this way. There's an old video by Paul Whelan where a subscriber to his channel emails him expressing concern that the issue with men today is that they're not alpha, lacking masculinity. The subscriber believes we need men who can set a strong example and criticizes Generation Y and Generation Z males, don't you think? Now, millennials and the post-millennial generation, those guys. So, did Paul and Elon hit exactly the same note? It's not really the fault of the younger guys, those who are 30 years old or younger, right? It's actually the responsibility of the older generation, the 40 and 50-year-olds, who allowed things to reach this point, you see? Those are the people who noticed that the divorce laws were being put into practice in a completely unfair manner and did nothing to change it and thought, no, okay, that's fine, you understand? And you'll notice that these guys who allowed this to happen were individuals with influence, people who held power and had traditional lifestyles and values. However, they really didn't care at all, and you'll observe that there are many men who are like that. They believe they are extremely alpha, they puff out their chest confidently and all, thinking they are the best. Yet, you'll see that the guy has gone through divorce once, twice, even 3 times. He considers himself super macho because he's paying alimony and managing to support everyone financially. However, the issue is that he's not actively involved in raising his son. He's not imparting any values or guidance. To summarize, the fallacy is really this. It's not just weak men who cause challenging times, rather it's strong men who fail to nurture and develop the next generation, allowing those men to remain weak and consequently letting times become difficult.